MacVoices is sponsored by Lynda.com. Expand your skills. Improve yourself. Get a free 10-day trial of all Lynda.com has to offer at lynda.com/MacVoices. And by TunnelBear, the really simple app to privately browse and get around block websites. To find out more and download your own TunnelBear, visit tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. Welcome to Mac Notables on MacVoices. This is a Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, he may be in retirement, but he's not out yet. Mr. Ted Landau is back with us. Ted, it's great to have you.
Great to be back, yes. And technically, my retirement does not preclude me from doing these occasional podcasts, though I won't be doing them as often. But basically, I defined my retirement as not doing anything for money or advertising or anything like that. Whatever I do will be for fun, and it's fun doing this with you. So I'll still do it from time to time.
Great. Well, you know you're welcome anytime. We love to have you. When we were talking about doing this particular episode, though, you brought up an interesting topic, and that is how great it is to live in the time that we live with all the technology that surrounds us and makes our lives easier. And I thought that was really an interesting observation, given that we all seem to maybe pass judgment on everything a little bit. We say, gee, we wish it would do this, we wish it would do that. And I really like the idea of you just pulling back and saying, hey, this is not all that bad.
Well, it's more than not all that bad. It's actually been pretty good. William Gibson was famous for saying something like, the future is already here, it's just not that evenly distributed. And that's the way I'm feeling these days, that I'm fortunate to be on the end of the spectrum that is getting the future. I'm living in the future, even if not everybody else is. And I could give you a couple of examples just to get the discussion rolling. One involves a device that I know we've talked about here before, which is the Ring doorbell that I got. And this actually happened just a couple of days ago. We were supposed to meet a friend at a Chinese restaurant. And my understanding was that we would actually meet him at the restaurant. And so Naomi and I got there, and we're sitting there, and we're waiting, and it's getting a little late, and he's not showing up. And all of a sudden, I hear a noise come from my iPhone. And actually, in terms of living in the future, I heard it first from my Apple Watch, which I was wearing, and then went to the iPhone to see what was going on. And it said that someone had rang our front door. Here we are, 5-6 miles away from our house, and I'm getting a notification that somebody rang our front door, and I go to the Ring app to see who it is, and sure enough, it's my friend that we're supposed to meet for dinner. And he's at our front door thinking that apparently, as I found out, that he was going to meet us at our house, and then we would go together to the restaurant. And so now I can see him, and I can communicate with him. And so I say, Ben, what are you doing there? You're supposed to be at the restaurant. We're waiting for you. We're at the restaurant now. And he couldn't believe it. He goes, you're kidding. You're not inside the house? He said, no. I said, well, I'm actually talking to you from the restaurant. And so he's talking to this device on my front door, communicating with me from the restaurant. And so I said, come on, go to the restaurant where we get here, and we're waiting for you. He said, okay, I'll be there in a few minutes. And that was it. And I started thinking, a few years ago, as recently as a few years ago, that idea would have been impossible to conceive, that I would be doing something so casually. I mean, I didn't have to set up anything, or plug things in or connect to things, as I might have expected to do years ago. There it was. Someone rang my doorbell. Someone rang my doorbell, and I'm talking to them from a restaurant, and solved a problem that, without the benefit of some device like that, might have been a lot more of a hassle. And eventually, I'm sure we would have talked on cell phones, another relatively modern device, but certainly made it easier. So that's the sort of thing that got me thinking. Another example, the Amazon Echo, which is living in the future all by itself. And even though most of what you can do with the Amazon Echo you can do with Siri on an iPhone, the way that it's just always there with those microphones, the way that I can just be doing anything, and I could be cooking or holding a newspaper or whatever, facing no particular direction, and just say the word. I don't even want to say it, or I'll start doing it. Just say her name and give a command, and it responds. I mean, that whenever someone's over our house that has never heard of the Amazon Echo, and I demonstrate it, they're just floored. It's like, oh my God! And I just think to myself, this is the future. You know, there are a limited number of things it can do now, but boy, a year from now, 2 years from now, it's probably going to just be unbelievable, all the things that you can do with that device. And one example, we have a scale, a kitchen scale that the battery died. And it's one of those odd watch batteries, not a AA or AAA, that you need to replace it with. And so I take the battery out and I look at it, and I forget it was something like an R2032 battery that needed to be replaced. And I was going to go down and get the battery to replace it. And ordinarily I might have written down what I needed, or I might have, if I was feeling a little more techno savvy, gotten out my iPhone and typed in, or even used Siri to say the battery, so I knew what battery I was going to get when I got to the drugstore. But instead I just said, and I'll take a chance that she won't do it now, I just said, Alexa, put our 2032 battery on the shopping list. And she said she would. And sure enough, I got to the drugstore, opened up my iPhone, went to the Alexa shopping list, and there it was. And so you just speak it, and it's done. I mean, it just is impressive. And yeah, I could go on. You could give maybe some examples of your own, or I have others that I could throw out at you.
I'm right there with you. I have to confess, because we had this exchange in email. I've still got. I have an Amazon Echo. It's sitting in the box. I haven't had a chance to unpack it yet. It's just the last couple of weeks in email. You kindly pointed out that it works much better out of the box. Thank you.
It does. Yeah.
Thank you for the technical advice, Dad.
You plug it in, you'll be amazed at the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had some of those same experiences. More with Siri, obviously, because Alexa's still in the box. But yeah, my iPhone lives at night on a charging dock right beside my bed, so it can also be my clock and my alarm clock. And I can't tell you the number of nights that I'm laying there trying to go to sleep, and I'm thinking of things that need to be done, and so I'll just say, hey, Susan, remind me to do such and such at 10 a.m. tomorrow. And of course, she pops up and says, "Okay, I'll remind you. Hey, launch my alarm clock app," and it goes right back to the way it was. Showing that, and no hands, no nothing.
Right. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, we used it the other day for things like definitions and spelling. And Naomi asked me the other day how to spell some word. I wasn't sure how it was spelled. I said, "Just ask Alexa how it's spelled," and sure enough, it did. And what's great, like I said, is that you don't have to, if your iPhone isn't plugged in at the time, or if you don't even have your iPhone on you, and Naomi keeps it in her purse, she doesn't carry it around like I do, so it's often in some other room. She doesn't have to worry about where anything is or what's working. You just say it into the ethers, it seems like, and bingo, this device over at the other end of the room gives you an answer. It's very impressive.
I am anxious to try it because, of course, now we have these. And
this is not a part of me, by the way.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that.
This is my white cat, not the one that can open doors, but.
I was going to say, was there a nuclear accident out there? Anyway, I completely lost my thought. Where was I going with that? Oh well. No. Oh, Siri. Now we have these. We have these, and if you flip your watch, it's listening, and you can say it to the watch. It may not be quite as convenient as just being able to shout it out into the ether, but it once again, this is the access to Siri in that fashion has changed the way that I do things. I find I'm using Siri more and more to get answers to simple questions, or to remind me to do things, set things on the calendar, whatever. And so I'm really excited that whenever we actually do get Apple's vision for HomeKit, whether it's next couple of months or in the fall, I think we're going to see just an expansion of this thinking.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That actually was going to be another one of my examples. I do have an Apple Watch, as you know, we've talked about that before, and here it is. And and one of the nice things about Apple Watch over your iPhone is it doesn't have to be plugged into a charger for Siri to be working, and so you can just essentially say, "Hey, Siri, and give a command, and it happens through the watch. And so that's has gotten me to use Siri a lot more as well. And of course, that works wherever you are. If you're wearing the watch, you don't have to even be in hearing range of an Amazon Echo. You could be outside on the street and say it. And I've done it to get it to show me, where something is on a map. I think was the most recent thing. I just said, show me on a map where such and such is, and it just did it. It's quite cool. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Apple Watch is a third example of living in the future, as far as I'm concerned.
And these are both really good implementations. And an implementation that is not working so well for me right now is the Samsung TV I have, because I keep trying to turn off the voice commands, and inevitably there will be somebody on TV that says something that triggers, the voice commands. So all of a sudden, if I'm in another room, or if I'm sitting right in front of it, the audio drops out, and the little command bar pops down and says, what do you want me to do? And it's like, I want you to go away. I want to turn you off. So there are some potential downsides here, but
probably gets a little testy when you say that.
It doesn't. Yeah, it never listens. But you're right. I mean, this is like Star Trek.
Yeah, these are Star Trek problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
My transponder is not working the way I expected it.
Yeah.
I had that happen. I had my iPhone plugged in on my desk when I was watching the latest Apple Media event, and somebody on the stage said something that triggered Siri to go on. And so all of a sudden Siri's going, yeah, I didn't understand that, or something like that.
Yeah, that's why, folks, if we've triggered anything at your house, we're sorry, because I know I've done it. I don't know how many times on the show. You don't mean to, but it becomes part of your vocabulary. So when you want to illustrate it, you say it, and then all the devices around me, pop awake and say, "What can I do for you?"
I think the voice commands are certainly one of the waves of the future, and I think we'll see that in the next Apple TV whenever they get around to having it come out. I think it's going to come out soon, but probably this fall now when they have their media events. But and that from all the rumors, and I believe them, is going to have a device that includes voice commands as well. That makes sense.
Everybody's moving toward voice commands. Microsoft has, I think, Cortana. I'm not sure what Android has, but I think they have one as well. And I'm a little surprised, frankly, at how much I'm using it now. I live alone, so it's not a problem. But even out in relative public, I don't mind asking my watch questions. I just don't. I will confess, it does seem a little strange to pick up your phone and try to say, hey, what's the humidity? That feels a little strange, but it doesn't feel as unnatural to do this. So, at least for me,
there are limitations to the interface. I mean, like you said, you may not, if you're in a quiet room, if you're listening to a talk or something like that, and you want to check something on your iPhone, you don't want to necessarily make noise and start talking to the iPhone while someone on stage is talking, or if you're saying something that's confidential, you don't want other people to hear it, you won't want to say it, and there might just be things that are awkward to implement through a voice. So yeah, there's certain limitations, but overall, once you get past those obvious limitations, I think voice command has it all over typing. It's so much more speedy and efficient and simple to just say something, and if the device interprets it correctly, then you're good to go. I can see where it's going to get more and more popular as time goes on.
Today's edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. Get a full free 10-day trial at lynda.com/MacVoices. Lynda.com is the best place to go to learn something new. They have over 3,500 and counting video courses on plenty of topics. For one membership fee, they offer access to all those courses, not just a limited subset or this tier or that. Everything. And their instructors aren't just someone in their basement who's doing his first video. All are professionals in their field who record in professional studios at lynda.com with professional gear. Their videos are professionally produced and look great and communicate exactly what is being taught. The key word here is professional, because you deserve the best. And you don't need to be tied to your computer to experience lynda.com courses. With the lynda.com app, You can load up courses to watch on the go on your iPhone, iPad, or other mobile device, with or without internet connectivity. That way you get to watch and learn when it suits you, where it suits you. It also means that you can take better advantage of the files that instructors provide for their courses. You can work through the same examples the experts are working with to be sure you're getting the same results. That's even easier when watching on your iPad and working on your computer. Not required, of course, but a nice touch, especially for things like Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. Not sure where to start? Lynda.com has playlists of courses to help you get the most out of their training on any given subject. Or you can make your own. Add courses to your personal playlist as you explore Lynda.com, or make a playlist of the courses you've just taken for easy reference later. There are lots of ways you can use playlists, just like you do in iTunes. And of course, the breadth and depth of the Lynda.com library. From animation and audio to presentations and photography, Lynda has something for everyone. Something you're interested in. Something that will help you learn a topic you want to know about for yourself or need to know about for your career. Right now, you can get a full, unlimited free trial of all that and much more by visiting lynda.com/MacVoices and signing up. No obligation, no restrictions. Watch as much as you want on any topic you want. Watch a course several times, or a whole lot of courses once. Your choice. I want you to go to lynda.com/MacVoices right now, sign up, and let me know what you think of lynda.com's selection, convenience, and the quality of the training. Actually, I already know what you'll think, but I'd love to hear you say it anyway. Lynda.com/MacVoices to access over 3,500 courses that will help you learn what you want to learn. Thanks to Lynda.com for their support of MacVoices. Do you have any thoughts on why we haven't seen Siri then for the Mac yet?
Not really. No, haven't given it much thought. Maybe if I thought about it, I could come up with some ideas. But it's an interesting question. Clearly there's voice technology built into the Mac already for dictation and stuff like that. Why there isn't a Siri? Apple, for the moment, is limited to its iOS devices. I'm not sure why, but I suspect it will be coming someday. I mean, I think we're going to continue. This is, it's a discussion that many people have had. I think we're going to continue to see a convergence of iOS and OS X. I'm pretty confident, at least for the next 4 or 5 years, that we're not going to see a unification. It isn't as if the Mac is going to be running iOS or the iOS devices are going to be running OS X or something like that. But I think we're going to continue to see an overlapping where things will work the same way on both devices within the overall constraints of the different operating systems. The way we already do. The way the Notes app now is identical, whether you're on an iPhone or a Mac, and the maps are quite similar now as well, and so on. So, and I think one of those things will be Siri. So there'll be a Siri implementation on the Mac for sure.
I think it's going down a little bit of a path there. I think it's interesting that we are seeing, you're right, not a complete convergence, but at the operating system level, but we are seeing a bit of a convergence at the app level. Jeff Carlson and I were just talking about how Photos for the Mac is obviously highly inspired by Photos for iOS. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily a bad thing by any means, because it does introduce a much more unified experience. I have some concerns that if they try to take the operating systems themselves and converge those, I think there will be something lost. But the individual apps, there's a lot to be said for making that a consistent experience.
Oh yeah. I don't think they're going to converge the operating systems. Is my current feeling, but yeah, I think it makes sense to converge the apps as much as possible. I think the loser will sometimes, if they push it too far, the loser will sometimes be the Mac, because the Mac is capable of doing more than an iPhone or an iPad can do. And so if you force the Mac to do nothing more than what the iPhone can do for the sake of conversion, then you're crippling the Mac to some extent, not letting it live up to its full potential. But I think for some apps, that'll be fine. I can't, at least with the current level of technology, I can't imagine, for instance, that Adobe would come out with a version of Photoshop that was identical on the Mac and the iPhone or something like that. It's just not going to happen. But maybe someday, who knows?
Well, to use the old analogies, of truck and car, I think there are always going to be truck apps that just you're going to want a larger screen. You're going to want different controllers, whether they be mice or trackpads or whatever, and keyboards to accomplish certain tasks. Maybe more complex tasks, maybe a lot more tasks at a professional level within whatever discipline you're talking about. But I think there's a lot to be said for taking a lot of this power, putting it in our hands, in our pockets, even now on our wrists. I mean, you're right. There's never say never, but I doubt there'll be a Photoshop for my Apple Watch anytime soon.
Well, I've probably said this on this podcast before, but if not, I'll say it now, and that is, my contention is that the iPhone is the most amazing technological device in my lifetime. That if I could go back in time, say 100 years, and somehow magically whatever I took back would work in that environment the way it works now, so that I still have Wi-Fi and everything else in some magical way. If I could pick one device to go back and impress people with what's going to happen 100 years later, it would be the iPhone. And that, I'm sure, would just amaze people beyond anything else I could show them.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by TunnelBear, the really simple app to browse privately and get around blocked websites. Find out more and download your own TunnelBear today at tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. It seems that everywhere you turn, you're being warned about this security issue or that privacy issue, especially when it comes to online privacy and security. While there's only so much you can do about the situations where others control your personal information, there's a lot you can do when you're in control. When you're online, one of those things is to use a VPN, or virtual private network, when you're traveling or using public Wi-Fi. But that's a hassle, right? Not with TunnelBear. TunnelBear is an easy-to-use VPN that boasts over 5 million users. With TunnelBear, you download their application, click once, and you're surfing securely and privately. No concerns over censorship, government or ISP surveillance, or corporate monitoring. Just you and the web. But TunnelBear must be seeing your data, right? Well, of course, that's how a VPN service works. But you don't have to wade through paragraph after paragraph of legalese trying to figure out what TunnelBear is or isn't doing with your data. Their plain English privacy policy is easy to understand, and I think you're going to like it, because it's as easy to understand as their service is to use. TunnelBear has apps for your Mac, your iPhone, and your iPad, as well as a Chrome extension, so that you can be safe no matter what device you're using. If you're concerned with who might be watching what you do online, or if you need to get around censorship blocks, or need to appear to a site to be surfing from somewhere other than where you are, then TunnelBear is for you. But don't take my word for it. Check out tunnelbear.com/MacVoices right now for all the details. Download your very own TunnelBear and start your safe surfing today. There's a free tier so you can find out just how easy it is to use TunnelBear, then pick the level of service that suits your needs. That's tunnelbear.com/MacVoices for the easiest VPN you've ever seen. Thanks to TunnelBear for their support of MacVoices. Inevitably, I draw on Star Trek references. I don't know why. But you think back. The iPhone is a combination communicator and tricorder. I mean, it's okay. So we can't quite point at an object and say, okay, that's 10 parts granite and 5 parts water or something. But at the same time, you can do an awful lot with it right now, and that they're FLIR. FLIR has an add-on for your iPhone that can turn it into a thermal imaging device. So that's the start.
Yeah, every once in a while you see an article, I think I wrote myself a few years ago, about all the devices that you no longer need because you have an iPhone. You don't need a cassette recorder. You don't need a separate GPS device. You don't need a separate telephone. You don't need whatever. And the list of things like that just keeps growing. I mean, there are probably, for the average person, there are probably 50 things these days that they don't need to have occasionally or regularly because the iPhone does them all.
Well, let's expand on that. You don't need to carry around a pocket calendar. You don't need to carry around an address book.
You don't need a separate camera.
Don't need a separate camera. Don't need a pager. Yeah. So, yeah, that's just a few right there.
This just goes on, sure.
Yeah. So you're right. It is good to live in the future. I like this.
Yeah, we're living in the future.
Yeah.
Apple Music. Another example. Even though I have Spotify and Spotify does most of what Apple Music does, somehow having it integrated with my iTunes library makes it even cooler. And it's not without its problems, as many people have talked about. But still, it was just impressive to again just be able to essentially say, play Beatles music or whatever, and it just happens. It's just unbelievable how things are developing. And not only that, but I don't have to own it. And once that's the other thing. I essentially that's the other part that's amazing. I essentially have at my disposal almost everything, and maybe one day soon everything that. And Beatles probably is a bad example because I'm not sure they're in the Apple library yet. But I have almost everything that's in the iTunes library available to me, even though I've never purchased it. I can just say play any specific song, and often music videos as well. Like if I hear a song on TV and I said, yeah, I'd like to, maybe it's playing in the background of a TV show I'm watching, and they just play 15 seconds of it. Well, for starters, I could use something like Shazam to find out what the song was if I wasn't familiar with it, which is living in the future all by itself. And then once I identify the song, I can just tell Apple Music to play that song. And even though I've never purchased it, it'll play the full version of the song. I mean, imagine doing that a few years ago. Just incredible.
I had an interesting experience with Shazam. Now that you mention it, the other day there was a music track on a TV show that I had on, and I really liked it. And so I whipped out Shazam and wanted to find out what it was, and it told me not only what the track was, it also told me that it was playing on that episode of that TV series. And it's like, whoa, this is.
This, a little too specific.
Yeah. It's like, who's looking in my window? Sometimes it is good just to pull back and realize. I mean, we all get so critical when we say, "Oh, this doesn't work exactly the way I think it should," and there was somebody posted a picture today on Twitter of the first quick take camera. If you remember that, I mean, talk about postage size images and how far we've come, and now we've got cameras on our phone that rival a lot of higher end cameras.
Yeah. A few years ago, I wrote an article for the Mac Observer on, I think it was with the iPhone 4 at the time, about how good the camera was becoming and how I could one day imagine that an iPhone would be my primary camera instead of the point-and-shoot Canon that I was using. And that day is here. I mean, I don't have the Canon anymore. I feel a little bit constrained that there's no telephoto lens capability, but I've given up on that to just use the iPhone. My wife still uses a Canon. If I need it for telephoto, I'll grab it from time to time. But 99% of the pictures I take are with the iPhone. And I think telephoto is coming. I have some idea that I think people are working on. I mean, the biggest problem with telephoto is how do you build a telephoto zoom lens, say, into a smartphone without having this giant thing sticking out of the phone. Right. I think they're working on solutions. And one, I think, might be to have two camera lenses, of different sizes, a wide angle and a telephoto lens built into the camera that you could switch between. That might be viable.
Yeah, and let's not forget the video capture capabilities.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Video capture is better than most dedicated video cams would be. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think about, when I was growing up, my dad had a 16 millimeter video camera, and, it was like shooting gold with those because you only had so many feet of film that you could load in there. And now we have, 240 frames per second slow motion? Yeah. Along with a nice 1080p camera. I mean, it really step back and think about that. It is amazing.
Yeah, on this little device that fits in your pocket and does a million other things as well, as we talked about. And for some reason, it sticks in my memory. I remember I had my first VHS full-size cassette video camera. It was the sort that you basically had to put it on your shoulder to take it because it was too heavy for you to really hold. And I remember that we were living in New York at the time, and I went to the Statue of Liberty and was using it to take videos of the Statue of Liberty. And I was lugging this thing around. It was like, like having a bowling ball that you were taking around with you all day. and putting it out and putting it on my shoulder every time I wanted to use it, and then putting it back. And I thought it was really cool that I was having video at all. And now I think, my God, I just take this iPhone out of my pocket and I'm taking video that's 100 times better than the quality I had with that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Think what we'll have in 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah. We are living in the future.
We are indeed.
That is the byword for today.
We are indeed. And I'm sure we'll come up with some other examples as we go through this. But yeah, sometimes it's good just to pull back and say, hey, for all the little niggly problems that we have, appreciate what we've got and what we can do with it, and at the price point that we can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Another thing that I wanted to touch base with you on is that you're looking to replace your beloved Mac Pro. And you posted something on the Slanted Viewpoint about that I have the impression you haven't found exactly what you want to do or what you want to, why you want to do it. But the one phrase, Ted, that really struck me is, I think you said that the current Mac Pro is 6 years old.
right.
And that got me to thinking, okay, is 6 years old really that old for a top-end, high-end computer?
Well, actually, as I thought about it, I didn't mention this in the article, so it's interesting that you bring it up. That was a good argument in favor of what I find missing about some of today's, morally all of today's Macs, and that is that the reason I'm still using that Mac Pro today is because it is so flexible. I'm using it with a monitor that I wasn't using back then. I'm using it with hard drives that are much faster and a higher capacity than I would have been able to get back then. I have two 2-terabyte hard drives in there. I'm using it with an SSD drive for my operating system and applications that is super speedy that I got from OWC, and all of it fits inside the case of the Mac Pro, which is very easy to just open the door and you're inside it, and these hard drives slide in and out. You don't have to use really any screws to screw them in. They're on these tracks, and you just pull it out and you put a new one in. It couldn't be more convenient, and the ability to add and improve on the machine in that way has been really cool and has extended its life. Because if I wasn't able to do those things, if I had gotten an iMac back in 2009 and still had to live with the hard drive and the display and that was evident back then, I wouldn't be using it. In fact, now that I mentioned it, that's exactly what has happened. If you look at the computer that's back there, that's a new iMac that I just got from my wife. We each have our own computers, and she had been using a 2009 iMac, which was actually surprisingly viable, even for an iMac, but had become impossibly slow. I had upgraded the memory. I think it had 8 or 16 gigabytes of memory, hoping that would do something. I tried to streamline the system so there wasn't so much overhead with processes that were going on. I did whatever I could. It was still incredibly slow. For part of it was her own doing, which I won't go into, but I can tell you that since we got this new iMac just the other day, it is unbelievable, the difference in speed for her. I mean, things that I used to sit in front of the computer when she'd ask me to help her with something, and I'd say, "You're actually using this computer this slow?" I said, "If my computer was this slow, I'd be throwing it out the window." And I said I'd get her a new one, but she wasn't. She didn't want me to get a new one. She thought that it wasn't as big a difference as I was making it to be, and so she didn't think there would be that much benefit to getting a new one. So she kept saying, it's okay. But finally, I said, "That's it. I don't care what you say. I'm getting a new computer," and it's made a difference, as she readily admits. And so that, of course, got me thinking about, well, I think my 2009 Mac Pro currently is the oldest piece of equipment that's plugged into a wall outlet that's in this room. Everything else, printers, routers, hard drives, everything else that I own has been updated now more recently than that. And so I'm thinking, no, it's now the time for me to think about getting a replacement for the Mac Pro. And certainly, even though it's still operational, I'm using it right now to talk to you over Skype. I would like to have a 5K display. I would like to have the opportunity to connect Thunderbolt devices. I would like her new iMac is clearly faster than this Mac Pro in many operations, and I would like to have that speediness. So, yeah, but then I started thinking about what I would want to replace it with, and that's where the genesis of the article was. And similar to things that I wrote a year or so ago when the Mac Pro came out, I had always had hopes that when Apple came out with a new Mac Pro, that's what I would replace my old Mac Pro with. But it became clear and remains clear that the Mac Pro is not a the new Mac Pro is not a replacement for the old Mac Pro. It doesn't have the flexibility for upgrading parts that the old one had, for one thing, which is almost okay, because as people have pointed out, with Thunderbolt being as fast as it is, you can get external storage that is almost as fast as the internal storage would have been on the old Macs. But still, I like the compactness of having everything inside. But the the other thing is that it's not priced for people like me, and I went into that in the article where I priced out how the cheapest possible Mac Pro setup I could get that would match the iMac that I just got for my wife. So matched it for hard drive, for RAM, and for a 5K display. And so, I don't want to pay for a penny more than I absolutely have to pay to try to get it to match the iMac specs. And when I did that, it came out to be $2,300 and some odd dollars more than the iMac, which meant that I essentially could have gotten two iMacs for the price of the cheapest Mac Pro that I could get by with. Mac Pro setup with a display and everything. And I said, at that price, I don't want to spend that much money. I'd rather get two iMacs than a Mac Pro. And so the Mac Pro wasn't going to make it for me. And the Mac Mini isn't going to make it for me either, because it's the other extreme. It's so underpowered. They went back to a dual-core processor for the top end Mac Mini that you can buy. Apple's message seems to be, we don't want you to buy a Mac Mini unless you are an entry-level user, and so that's clearly not going to be for me either. And so that leaves the iMac as the only possible choice I can get for a computer to replace my Mac Pro, and it isn't perfect for the reasons that we've talked about before. So really, there isn't a perfect replacement for people like me who are very happy with their old Mac Pro, but that's tough. That's life in the big city. When I get a new computer, undoubtedly at this point, unless Apple comes up with some radical new machine in the next few months, it'll be an iMac similar to the one that's behind me right now.
To be fair to the Mac Pro, though, you were trying to match the specifications that you could customize, but you've still got a lot more of a workhorse of a machine because of the processors and the graphics cards and all. So
yes, sorry, I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I didn't mean to say that the Mac Pro was identical to the iMac. Right. What I meant is that I took the specs that I could alter, RAM, hard drive, display, and tried to match them as closely as I could without overspending. I didn't want to get something that was much more expensive than I needed to get. So I tried to keep it as minimal as I can. Granted that Mac Pro is still a more powerful workhorse, as you said, than the iMac, and can do things, especially things that require multiple cores and threaded processes and so on. Can do it far better than the iMac can do. And for some people, that's going to be important. But for tasks that I do, I am not I'm not a video producer. I'm not doing this. I don't do a lot of complex manipulations in Photoshop, and so for my use, those things don't really matter. In fact, as I mentioned in the article, there was a Macworld article that came out around the time the Mac Pro came out that showed that that the iMac was actually faster than the Mac Pro for certain real-world type tasks. They gave it a Finder test, an iTunes test, a couple of other application type tests for things that people like me would actually do. And the iMac was actually faster. And this, of course, was, and we're talking about the price range for the cheapest 4-core Mac Pro that you can get, the one that starts at $3,000. That was the one I was using. If you wanted to, for some reason, get a 6-core, an 8-core, or 12-core, whatever Mac Pro you're talking about, Never mind 2 times the cost of an iMac. You're talking about 6 times the cost of an iMac, or something like that. It quickly gets ridiculous. So yes, but it does much more. I'm not saying it's not worth it to certain people. I'm just saying it's not worth it to me.
Right. The compactness issue seems to be the big one, because there's no question the Mac Pro the current Mac Pro is a big step forward. What I find though so fascinating is that the iMac that's sitting there, it can best a 6-year-old Mac Pro. I mean, because back then, I mean, the Mac Pro, I don't know what level of Mac Pro you bought, but that was serious big iron. And now the consumer level computer, admittedly a high-end consumer level computer, but a consumer level computer can outperform what the pro level was 6 years ago. We're back to that whole living in the future thing.
It certainly can. Yeah, I guess we're back to living in the future.
So do you have you think that a new iMac is in your future, or are you going to hold on for a while?
I think it's in my future. At this point, I'd like to hold on for Skylake to come out in an iMac instead of the current round of processors, which I think will offer better 5K support from what I've heard, and have a couple of other advantages. I'd hate to get a new iMac and see a major overhaul of the machine like a month later. So I'll probably wait to the end of the year. I think if a new iMac with a new processor is in the offing, it'll probably come out later this year. But so if November rolls around and they're still selling the same iMac, and I'm getting as dissatisfied as I increasingly am, I'll probably just get an iMac in the fall. But I'm going to stick with this for at least a few more months.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I'm not even sure how old the new 5K iMacs are. I was thinking, are they a year old? I don't think they're a year old, are they?
They are less than a year old, I think. They came out last fall.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So, well, you never know. I mean, it's just the way it is. Another thing, for some reason, that just triggered my memory. What is your thinking on the new iPods coming out? Relevant, not relevant, interesting, surprising?
No, it wasn't surprising, especially with all the rumors that they were going to be coming out. So, but I think, yes, I think they did a great job of updating it in every way except for the screen size. That has the A8 processor, so it's the state-of-the-art processor. They have a much better camera. For anybody that wanted an iPod Touch and said, gee, I think at this point I'd rather get a used iPhone and not use it as a phone, just use it as an iPod Touch. I'll be better off. I think that sort of thinking will shift in the direction of now getting a new iPod Touch, except for the screen size, which I don't entirely understand unless Apple is worried about driving sales away from their iPhone, because the iPhone came out in 2 new sizes, the 4.7 and 5.5 inch sizes, and I think everyone agrees that almost more than anything else, that bump in size led to their tremendous popularity of the iPhone 6. And so I can, if you wanted to have parity with the iPhone, at least have the 4.7 size, maybe not have the 5.5 size, but at least have a 4.7 inch iPod Touch would have made sense to me. And by limiting it to the 4.0 inch size, I think, I don't know, they either, again, as an example of Apple deliberately crippling, maybe isn't the right word, but limiting a device for some marketing reason that they're concerned about, or they just view these as, tiny devices like the iPod Nano. Maybe they just don't want to view an iPod of any sort as being big, relatively speaking, so they kept it at the 4 inches. But I can imagine that people will say they don't want it because it's not 4.7 inches. But for people who are satisfied with a 4-inch screen, I think you can't get a better iPod I can't imagine getting a better iPod than Apple has put together for that. It was a really nice upgrade.
Yeah, it looks like it. It's one of those things where you look at the pictures and, do I need one? Of course not. I've got this beautiful iPhone 6 Plus sitting here. It has plenty of memory. I mean, if I think about it in the right way, it's like having an iPod in my phone. So why do you want one of these? But God, they're just so gorgeous. You still have that techno lust just to own one. I mean, would have no use for it. I probably would never use it in favor of my phone, but you still want one. They're just beautiful.
Well, yeah, they are cool to look at, but I personally don't want one, and for exactly the reason that you said. I mean, I can't imagine why anybody with an iPhone, or certainly with an iPhone 6, would want an iPod Touch as well. If I can imagine, well, there are certain situations where I don't want to take my iPhone with me because I'm going to be doing some hard exercising and I don't want to risk getting it damaged, and I want to be able to listen to some music. Well, then you get an iPod Nano. That would suffice. A lot cheaper. And if you don't, aside from that, I can't imagine why anybody with an iPhone would want an iPod at all these days. And certainly not an iPod Touch. The iPod Touch is for people that don't have an iPhone.
Yeah, well, and you bring up the exercise thing, or situations where you don't want to risk your device. I could see one of the low-level iPod Touches, low-cost current model iPod Touches, because they are capable of streaming Wi-Fi anyway, so you could still access Apple Music from that. I don't think. Well, yeah, with the iPod Touch, I think that you can still download a playlist from Apple Music offline.
I think you can. Yeah, I haven't. And clearly, you're right. The iPod Nano doesn't support Apple Music.
Right.
So that would be one reason. But still, I think the number of days that you can't have your iPhone with you, and that you do want some sort of iPod with you, and that it's important that it support Apple Music, not simply be able to play offline music. I mean, the number of days that would actually happen to me are like maybe one day a year.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to worry about it.
I did want to also, we talked about it just a little bit, but to wrap up, what has your experience been with Apple Music? Has it been positive, negative? Question?
My experience has been limited but positive. I haven't had any of the problems where my music was being converted to the DRM version that some people complained about, and that apparently the new version of iTunes is supposed to fix. I didn't have any problems at all like that. It all worked just about perfectly for me. I haven't used the playlist all that much. The For You generated playlists all that much. I tried them. I haven't used them all that much. I have used it just to pick, like I said, music that I don't own and listen to it. That's where I'll, maybe someone will be talking about some new artist that I haven't heard of, and I'll just say, play the latest album from this singer that I want to hear about, and then they'll just play the album. It's kind of cool, Used to be, if I wanted to, again, talking about living in the future, I mean, I can remember back in the days of CDs and LPs that if someone came out with an album and I wanted to hear the album, I had to go buy it. That was about the only way you could hear the album. Because there would be a rare exception that a radio station would play an album straight through. And so the only way to hear an album straight through would be to buy it. Or borrow someone else's copy of it, and those days are over now. I worry that musicians are going to have a tougher and tougher time making money because of the way things work. I can't imagine that they make as much money in this system as they would have in the days when I would have had to buy it. So instead of me buying the latest whatever Bruno Mars album because I'm interested in it, I can just say, Apple Music essentially play the latest Bruno Mars album whenever I feel like. No reason for me to own it.
I don't know. I'd love the whole music. The payment for music seems to be such a quagmire of he said, she said, this side, that side. I would love to see an objective examination of just how much money gets from the store to the artist versus what the artists are generating from the plays on multiple systems, and I think you have to look at it. There went the cat. I think you have to look at it from an aggregate. You can't just look and say, okay, well, Spotify paid, artist X, this much, or iTunes paid them Y, because artist X was being played both on Spotify and iTunes and Rhapsody and who knows where else. So I wonder how that that works, what the actual at the bottom line payout is on both sides to know whether this is viable or not?
Well, everything I've read suggests that they are earning significantly less, except for the few, really big stars like Taylor Swift. But the average mid-level musician that has some degree of popularity is earning less under the system, and it depends more and more on concerts to generate their significant revenue than they had in the past, when CD sales could really have been significant. But of course, on the other side, there's always that other side. The other side is the democratization of it all. That the opportunity for somebody to put together a music video and put it on YouTube and start a career because it goes viral is something that you couldn't have done a generation ago. Unless you could convince a record producer to cut an album with what you wanted to do, then your career wasn't going to go anywhere.
And to compare it again, there was a time when radio stations, were having to be paid to play, or legally or illegally, they were being paid to play things. They were being paid to give you exposure. Now you log on to Spotify or iTunes, and these artists can get all the exposure they want. All they have to do is be found or get people to talk about them. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole, it's strange, mm-hmm. because music was being given away in a sense over the radio, mm-hmm. and the radio DJs were the ones that were controlling access to it. Now mm-hmm. it's being given away over Spotify, iTunes, and the like, and those same opportunities exist for the live performances, because that can't be taken away. So I just don't know. There's so many questions and not enough answers from objective parties to tell us.
You remind me, someone put a sarcastic comment on Twitter the other day about the Beats One radio station with Apple Music. And they said, "Oh, Beats One radio, it's curated. There's an actual person that's deciding what to play and playing them in some interesting order." And there's a whole generation of people that don't realize that was radio a generation ago. That was what everybody was doing. Like they rediscovered some new way of listening to music.
It is interesting that it's being seen as a new way to discover music, because basically all you're doing is you are delegating that responsibility to the Beats One DJs. Mm-hmm. And is that good, or would I rather delegate to somebody else that's interested in the music that I like? Do I really need to be exposed to all this stuff that maybe I don't like? Would a narrower focus be better?
I think it's a real age thing. I find myself less interested in being exposed to new music as I get older, and more interested. I still want to be exposed to some new music, but usually it's because I hear something. But like, I'll read an article that says this is a great new artist that you should listen to, or I'll hear some music on a TV show that I'm not familiar with, and I want to hear more of it, and so I'll investigate. But the idea that I'll just turn on a radio station with the hopes of listening for a couple of hours and discovering new music that I wasn't expecting to hear, I don't do that. I did that when I was younger, but I don't do that now, and I imagine it's a real age difference.
Probably so, and probably just given the math of the thing, that as you get a couple years on you start to stack up favorite artists, favorite tracks, and then you get a few more years and you got more artists and more tracks, and after a while there's only so much time to listen to stuff.
But I still find new things. I go to some music festivals or something like that and hear some artists that I never heard of before. It happened last year. Discovered a couple of new artists I really like. It's good. And speaking of Apple Music, by the way, before I forgot, that's another thing that I think augurs well for a new Apple TV coming out, because as many people have noticed, Apple TV doesn't support Apple Music, and I think that's kind of strange, and I can't imagine that it will stay that way. And perhaps, my thinking, along with other people, is that the reason that it's not supporting Apple Music is because it's going to be part of some new piece of hardware that's going to be coming out in a few months, and then Apple TV will get Apple Music support.
Yeah. We're as guilty as the next person, Ted. We want it. We want it now. We don't want to wait. And if it's not here, why isn't it?
Yeah, I try. Again, this is part maybe of getting older, but I try my hardest right now to stop doing that. Exactly. I used to be I read the rumors. I think about what I want. I think about what's coming up. I say, oh my God, like right now, I'd be saying, "Oh my God! In just 2 months, it's going to be September. There's going to be that Apple Media event where they announce the iPhone 6s and OS 9 and El Capitan are going to be released, and maybe they'll announce a new Apple TV then that I've been waiting for. And then in October, there's typically another event, and then, like I said, maybe by November, December, they'll be coming out with a new iMac before the end of the year, and then it's already thinking about, and the iPad Pro, and it's supposed to be coming out, and what's going to happen next. And by then, there'll be something that they'll be predicting is going to be coming out next March. And you can find yourself always always living for what's going to happen 3 to 6 months ahead. And as they say in mindfulness and meditation type stuff, you're not living in the now. I want to slow down a bit, I guess, as I get older, and enjoy today, and not sit around and wish that it was 3 months later and the iPad Pro is out already. It'll be 3 months later someday, and the iPad Pro will come out, and we'll be fine. But in the meantime, I'm going to enjoy today as much as I can.
I think that's wise, and it sort of wraps up where we started. We are living in the future, and we have a lot to appreciate that is in our hands right now. And odds are that none of us are taking full advantage of all the features and the things that we could be doing with what we have now, because we're looking toward that next thing we think may be coming. So slow down a little bit, smell the roses, get a little training.
Slow down. You're already living in the future.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably like us already with a lot of the devices we've talked about, and you're at the end of the unequal distribution that's already living in the future.
Yeah. On that very positive note, hey, it's great to see you, Ted. Thanks for being here and having such a wide-ranging discussion. This was a lot of fun, and I promise by the next time we get together, I will have unboxed Alexa.
Okay, and we'll take notes and compare notes and see how we like it.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Notables on MacVoices. MacVoices? Oh.
MacVoices?
Yeah, MacVoices, yeah.
And we were supposed to talk about something else, right?
Yeah. Brand new show here on the network. We'll be back again soon. As always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting MacVoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.